Musonante is my name.
Bright is my name. Nawe Lamek is my name.
Arjuna Harriet.
My name is Blessing Ainembabazi.
Members, the question goes discuss the history of social work in Africa and in Uganda.
Social work is a practice-based profession that promotes social change, development, and that empowers people and community. That is our definition for social work. And before social work as a profession, the responsibilities were largely on missionaries, mainly the religious institutions, especially the church. History of social work, that's what they asked us. But we are going to start looking at the history of social work. We start with the history of social work in Africa. This social work, we are going to give it out in three phases. One is the indigenous phase, and colonial phase, and the developmental phase. We are going to describe them differently. And one, the indigenous phase refers to traditional social practices that centered on family, community, and spirituality. During this phase, social work was largely community-centered, and it was always done by the local people, the indigenous people, and it had no special category, but they just lived on beliefs and the social aspects of social work culturally. The second one is colonial phase. Now, we know before indigenous, that is before colonialisms came. So the colonial phase is that phase that happened in the colonial time when the colonialists came. So this time the social work was mainly brought by the colonialists, but it was favoring them. Now it was the colonialists were the ones who were giving out the social services in conjunction with the Africans. So we got the developmental phase, and this is where now after colonialism, this is the phase where the social work was to be put into institutions. Now we started having institutions, and these institutions were started getting how to study social work in an organized way. This social work after the colonialisms emerged in African countries, and this was mainly, now it started being as a profession now. It started in countries like Ghana, Sudan, Zambia, Ethiopia in the early 1920s through up to the 1980s. That is the history of social work in Africa. Okay, now we are going to look at the history of social work in Uganda. And here social work in Uganda started a long time ago, before the introduction of formal education. In the pre-colonial period, social work services were given by the chiefs. There is what we used to call the parish chiefs, and they were responsible for giving these services. And the services that they used to give include education, counseling, talking to the widows, talking to the orphans, and they would give them such services. Now, in the colonial period, social work function, colonial period, the formal education was introduced in 1950. Now, around 1950 up to 1962 in independence, that is when the government of Uganda started to bring social services to be formal. And here, institutions were brought in. Institutions like Makerere was built in 1969. Now, in conclusion, the history of social work in Uganda has been defined. Okay, the history of social work, not only in Uganda but also in the whole of Africa, has been defined in 3 phases. The pre-colonial phase, the colonial phase, and the developmental phase. This social work has been in evolution. Many changes have been brought about, and we believe very many changes are going to be brought about in this social work as a profession. Thank you so much. We are discussing and presenting this question of